And thank you for joining us today. As y'all know, budget season is coming here. So I think today we've got a couple of good classes that will help you. And also we have some great sponsors on that might be able to help you with some of your budgeting this year as well. We're going to have our first class today is going to be with Rudy Forehand, who's the manufacturer's rep for Benjamin Moore. He's going to do the 201 practical solutions and problem solving for painting. And then followed by Rudy will be Carmelo Giglio. He's the owner and principal. He'll do a concrete restoration class. So our class experts today will help with your budget and planning and information. And so will the experienced sponsors. So I'd like to introduce the sponsors, starting with my company. I'm with Capital Lighting now, Peggy West. And today I have my manager on, the national sales manager for Capital Lighting. Our commercial division is called the Pro Division. That's Javier Fernandez. Javier, would you like to say a few words?
Good afternoon, everyone. So Capital has been around since 1924. We're mostly known for retail, luxury, and designers. About a year ago, I started a division which specializes in the commercial industry, builders, developers, COAs, HOAs, catering to a different portion of what Capital is normally used to. We do have 9 stores. Our division is the Capital Pro division. We're nationally represented. We have reps and vendors in every state and can do everything from photometrics to specifying jobs for engineers. We work hand in hand with architects as well as the developer or contractor. So we're known as a commercial division, but we really do job management for the entire process for all your lighting needs.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thank you for being on the call today.
Thank you, guys.
Next, I'd like to introduce Vinteum software, not just to introduce Jennifer, but before I do, I just want to say thank you to Yasmin Johannes and to Lila Scola. This is like our wind beneath the wings for the class today. So Jennifer, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining and utilizing our platform here. From Vinteum Software. We're an association website communication and management portal. If you guys have any questions, we help with homes, condos, property managers, property management companies as well. I'll leave my information here in the chat and you can reach out if you'd like. Thank you.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you for joining us and congratulations on your new position with Vinteum. And we'll all be looking forward to seeing you around. We also have today Rudy Martin, who is the Senior VP and partner with Munyon Painting. Rudy, a few words about Munyon.
Hi, my name is Rudy Martin. I'm the VP of Business Development at Munyon Painting, Restoration, and Waterproofing. That's our full name. It's a little long, so we just call it Munyon. We're a premier painting firm. We've celebrated our 70th year. If you have any painting, restoration, or waterproofing needs, feel free to reach out. I'll also be moderating today's class. So if you have any questions, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. I'll go ahead and read those and I'll politely or not politely interrupt Rudy and Carmelo and we'll hopefully get your questions answered. So if you have a question on a topic, feel free to go ahead and use that Q&A button at the bottom. Thank you.
Okay, Rudy, thank you so much. I'm not sure why she's not on, but I do have a banker with us today, Truist Bank, which was formerly BB&T, or they merged. Jamie Gelfand, she may come on later. We'll do another introduction. If anyone has any banking questions, just put them in the chat and I'll get them to her. Next, I'd like to introduce the paving lady, our Dawn Miller, and she does the marketing and sales now. Dawn.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Dawn with the Paving Lady. We are a full service asphalt contractor that's been in business since 1985. We do asphalt overlays, seal coating, concrete curbs and concrete sidewalks. We also do ADA upgrades to your common areas and parking lots. If you think your roadways or parking lots have an issue, it's your own asphalt. So give us a call and we'll be happy to help you protect your investment. Enjoy the class and have a great day.
Thanks, Dawn. on the phone joining us today is Tom Acosta from APB Security. What's going on?
Hi,
with
everybody.
security?
Hi, everybody. Everybody can hear me okay?
We can.
Oh, great. We are APB Security, American Protection Bureau. We've been around for close to 18 years, very successful in the Tri-County area. We provide armed and unarmed security, and what makes us different is we customize the security economically to your and tailor it to your needs. Again, we do all types of security, patrol, roving, you name it. We do schools, colleges, you name it. Please, if you have any questions or any suggestions or any ideas on security, please don't hesitate to give me a call. I'd be glad to answer. There's a lot of changes going on. Tallahassee's coming up with all kinds of legal beagle stuff. So keep it nice. Tom, APB Security, thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you so much. I also have another sponsor, LM Funding. We've got Jimmy Gonzalez on today. Jimmy?
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on this very, very important webinar. I'm Jimmy Gonzalez. I work for LM Funding. I am the market director here. And LM Funding, I'd like to change up how I project this, but we'll basically guarantee you a collection for your association's delinquency using attorneys only. We provide upfront cash to the associations per each delinquent account, basically in the form of your safe harbor. And if there is no collection because of a bankruptcy or a bank foreclosure, then my company will pay all of the association's legal fees and costs. That is absolutely unheard of. A lot of people think that they don't pay those, but when you don't have a collection, even if it's your deferred billing from your attorney, you will be paying those. But we will cover all of those costs and fees. I'll put up my information later on so you can contact me. I welcome the opportunity to sit down with you and to take a look at your AR. Even if you don't have a problem now, in the future, at least you'll know how to handle it.
Sounds great.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks so much. You guys, a big part of a budget of every association is landscaping, so I have to have a landscaper on. Today we have the sales and business development manager from Yellowstone Landscape. Brian, you want to introduce yourself? Brian Van Dam?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Peggy, and to all the other sponsors and the attendees. Welcome. Hope you enjoy the program, and thank you to all involved for all that you do to make this happen. As Peggy mentioned, my name is Brian Van Dam with Yellowstone Landscape. We'd love to be your landscape partner. We work closely with board members, property managers, anything we can do to be that strategic partner, that trusted resource for you. We don't sub anything out. We do all landscape related services through our own company. So that's your landscape maintenance. We can do landscape design and install, irrigation maintenance, install and repairs. We can do lawn and ornamental pest management, fertilization for your grass, plants and palms. We can apply mulch. We can do your flower change outs. We can do tree trimming, palm trimming. We can do tree removal, root pruning, and of course, hurricane prep. Not only trimming, but we do have a pre and post storm safety plan. So anything related to the landscape of your property, please think of me and let me know how we can help.
The storms are coming, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Thank you so much. Okay. So before I introduce our first hour CE class, I want to introduce Carmelo Giglio, who's the second hour presenter. You can maybe wave and then reintroduce yourself later, Carmelo, but he is the principal and the owner of United Professional Engineering. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Rudy Forehand, Regional VP for Benjamin Moore. And Rudy, would you like to start your class and introduce your company, please?
Yep. Good morning, everyone. Rudy Forehand with Benjamin Moore Paints. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get things going here for you. All right. All right. Could everybody see that?
Yes.
Are we good? Yeah. Okay. Terrific. All right. Rudy Forehand with Benjamin Moore Paints. I've been with Ben Moore for 32 years here in the South Florida market. We work in from all the way from Key West up to Vero Beach right now. I work along right now with Regal Paint Companies. Regal is our largest distributor. Benjamin Moore only distributes to independent retailers. We don't own our own stores. So I am their rep for the largest retailer in the Southeast United States for Benjamin Moore paints. So it's again, we sell coatings for everything for your properties, from the top to the bottom, inside and out. We take care of it all. We get involved with the maintenance, as well as getting involved with the larger jobs where we do specifications, we do color consultations, color renderings, inspections, problem solving, and so forth. We take care of all this. So I wanted to thank Peggy for inviting me to do this presentation. So as I go along, again, I like to do these presentations as kind of have any questions, as Rudy was pointing out. Please just go ahead and put in the Q&A. If you have any questions as I go along, and then of course make sure all your CAM information is recorded appropriately, so that I could give you the appropriate credit for the CAM afterwards. All right. So again, this is just going to be the state provider number and the license number that we're qualified with the state of Florida. So again, you'll get all that information afterwards. I'll put my name and phone number as well on the chat as soon as I'm finished here, so we could start to move on. All right, the classifications of paint. What we're going to try to do today, and some of my learning objectives, is that the whole thing when you're painting, as with doing any other project, is you want to have education. The more you know, the better you're going to be able to solve problems. You're going to be able to make sure, differentiate the contractors like Munyan Painting from the rest of the crowd. That they're going to be doing things the right way. The worst thing you do as you're going into budget season, when you're using paint, especially on a repaint project, it's one of the largest budgets issues that you have. And when you do it, you want to make sure the money is spent wisely, and that you get what you're supposed to be getting out of the project itself, and not get shorted on any part of the project. So these classes I like to put on are just part of that education. So today, what we want to try to do is to provide an overview of the classification of paints, discuss some of the advantages and disadvantages using a water-based or an oil-based paint, talk a little bit about surface and priming techniques as well. We're going to talk a little bit about resin types and the curing mechanisms, and how in South Florida that really makes a difference for your property as well. We're going to list some of the physical properties of latex and oil-based paints, as well as explain kind of the different types of prep that's needed. And any surface we'll get into a little bit later. Preparation is 80% to 90% of any successful paint job. So you have to really look at that and make sure that's being done correctly. And then we're going to discuss reasons why people paint along. And then at the end, what I want to try to do, if time allows, we want to go through some of the different paint problems and what causes the paint problems. Because again, education is the key. If you see the paint problems when you're having on the surface, before you start painting, you know what's causing it. Then you'll have a better idea of what to fix it and spend your money wisely on it. All right. So paints, again, paints are generally classified, and this is all paints are classified by according to the type of resin they contain. So for instance, if you see a latex paint, they generally contain that is considered a latex resin. Oil-based coatings, generally the alkyd resin is the general term that we use for the most common resin used for oil-based coatings, which is a big part of it. The mechanism by which each of these coatings dry and cure is very important to know as well. Most of the coatings that you're going to run into in the market that we're dealing with today, of course, is latex coatings and oil-based coatings. But there's a new breed of coatings coming on that's becoming a real big part of what we're using, is called waterborne coatings or a waterborne alkyd. So we'll get a little bit further into that. And again, the drying and the curing and how these coatings dry and cure will dictate what product you're going to be using in different substrates and different surfaces. So the way, again, we talk about the how we classify paint. We classify paint according to the resin or the curing mechanism. Resin is essentially the glue that holds the pigment in suspension, and it gives the coating its particular characteristics. So if you want scrubbable products or if you want something that's going to be durable, the resin is really going to be the product that's going to hold. Is essentially the glue that holds it on. The pigment or the color is kind of what it embodies itself. Curing, the curing mechanism really determines the dry time, the time it takes from the coatings we're going to be talking about today for the solvent to evaporate from the coating, and then how long it takes for that coating to reach its optimum hardness, which is, again, real critical to know when you're talking about paint and discussing paint and choosing the right paint for your particular situation, especially in South Florida. All right, the base, these are some of the common resin types that we run into. The most prolific that we use down in South Florida right now, both inside and outside surfaces, are latexes or acrylic resins. That's a big piece. Oil-based and alkyds are probably the next use resin that we're using in our market. And of course, the epoxies and urethanes are more of a specialized coating used for different areas where you need the certain characteristics that the resins of these coatings will give you. And again, waterborne coatings, due to the EPA regulations and EPA laws, are really becoming a big piece of the coatings that you're going to be using in the market itself. But again, each resin has its advantages and disadvantages. There is no one paint that we can make that is going to change, that one paint that you could use on any particular surface. In our line itself, we have close to 4,000 different SKUs in the line. So paint is very customized, is very detailed, and we get it into the we really drill down to the specific conditions that we run into on a daily basis down here. All right, some of the curing mechanisms that we use. Solvent evaporation, essentially where the solvent that's in the coating itself is going to evaporate. Both oil-based paints and latex paints use that. A lot of urethanes and epoxies do as well, but not to the extent as latex and oil-based paint does. This is, again, the evaporations. That's what we call the solvent evaporation, gives us the drying time of when the coating and when you could actually touch the coating itself. Coalescence is essentially in latex paints a process that as the solvent evaporation or the water in latex paint. And to run back a little bit, the resin determines what solvent will be used in the coating itself. So in latex paint, as the solvent evaporation is occurring, a process called coalescence occurs. And coalescence is where the force of the binder and the resin coming together. It's called coalescence in latex paints, and that kind of forms that continuous film that you see there. Oil-based paints, they cure by a process called oxidation. They also use solvent evaporation to dry, but as they cure, the oxidize or the oxidation, or as it oxidizes the binder, the alkyd resin actually oxidizes and reacts with the oxygen in the air. And that makes the the curing mechanisms that you run into. The difference that we're running, and then now when we're discussing about the drying versus curing, is that when we're discussing about curing mechanism, you got to understand first that drying is what is drying, and drying is essentially when the coating is evaporated, the solvent is evaporated from the coating, and also that the curing is when the coating is going to reach its optimum hardness and resistance. And there's a big difference between the two. So you have to kind of keep that into understanding when, for instance, how the coating is going to dry, when you're going to be using the coating, and where to use that particular coating, especially if you're using it in areas where people are going to be around the coatings, especially in interior surfaces. Oil-based paints generally dry in about 4 to 8 hours. They cure generally within 10 days. In a perfect setting, latex paints generally dry in under 4 hours, generally, and anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour at the most in our environment. And latex paints cure, they actually take a little bit longer to cure because of that process of coalescence. that takes a little bit longer. So that could happen up to 30 days. In the area, and we're going to talk about the South Florida environment here in just a second. The environment that we live in really extends the curing time on these coatings, sometimes by a factor of 4. So you could be on latex paint, you could actually take up to 120 days, especially when you get here during the summer, where that coating is going to reach its optimum hardness. So those are some of the factors that you have to really kind of take into account when you're painting with paint itself. And one of the things I want to talk about when you're doing your project outside and you're painting in South Florida with all the rain that we get, especially with the upcoming rainy season, latex paint outside is developed so that if it dries, it'll dry generally within about an hour. Any rainstorms that we get after that period would generally not affect any kind of coating. Paint applicators like Munyan Painting, they themselves will understand that, and all of us in the paint business, when we're painting buildings outside, we look at the weather report daily, so we know when to stop and when to go. But again, painting is a 365 season in South Florida. All right, so the factors that affect curing, again, the curing part of it, where it's going to reach its hardness, is going to be temperature, air movement, the relative humidity, and dew point. And it's usually a factor of all these 4 different factors, among others, that's going to affect the influence between using a latex paint or an oil-based paint itself. So again, temperature with oil-based paints, believe it or not, high temperatures, lower viscosity. And when I say viscosity, kind of how thick or how thin the coating is. So higher temperatures will make oil-based paints a little bit thinner, which is going to make it a lower viscosity. It's going to make it a little bit thicker, a little bit harder to apply. Low temperatures increase the viscosity. So latex paints, when you have high temperatures tend to interfere with the bonding or the adhesion of the latex paint. And again, when we get to low temperatures into cooler areas, the low temperatures will affect the curing, where that coalescence process that we're talking about is going to affect that as well. Thankfully, down here in South Florida, with the cool weather, we don't have too much of that issue down here. But again, it's sometimes a factor at least 1 or 2 days a year. Air movement also has a big piece of affects our curing quite a bit. With oil-based paint, air movement is really going to shorten the drying time, and it's going to remove the odors a lot quicker. But at the same time, when you have these coatings that dry too fast, as what happens with latex paint, if too much air movement, these coatings will result in flash drying. You don't get you could get brush marks showing a little bit more on the coating. You get more roller marks, and you can even get some crating, especially with latex paint, if there's too much air movement occurring, where the paint has what we call, coined it in the industry, an open time. So that particular open time is the time that coating remains wet before it begins to dry. And the longer that period is, the longer it has the ability to be able to kind of flatten out any brush marks or any roller marks. Latexes, as we talked about with the dry time, are so short, so they tend to show a little bit more. That's why spraying, especially on the outside finishes, not only because of the efficiency of applying the coating, but the finish itself generally is going to have a much nicer finish when you're using that on there. Humidity, and that's something that we don't deal with in South Florida, right? So high humidity could lower the appearance of gloss on oil-based paints. So you have to be, and it could even affect the color, so you have to be a little bit careful on that. High humidity might slow down the drying time of latex paint. So you have to be, again, cognizant of that fact, although the coatings that we're manufacturing at this point are really, with the temperature differences that we have here and the high humidity levels, our coatings work real well on there. Low humidity also, again, can cause, because the coating dries too fast, it can cause some poor surface adhesion with latex paint, but generally down here, we don't have that much of an issue with it. Dew point is a real big piece that we have to deal with down in South Florida. Dew point, when we talk about dew point, we're talking about the temperature of the air if the temperature of the air is lower than the dew point of the substrate. In other words, the presence of moisture will affect adhesion. For instance, if you fill up a glass of water and put some ice in it, the sweating that you're going to get on the outside of it, that's really going to, if you get that kind of sweating when you're getting on coatings and so forth, it can affect adhesion, it can affect dry time, color, and especially with oil-based paints, it can affect gloss itself. So it's available. It happens with both coatings. Essentially down here, we have 2 periods of the year where we have the biggest issue with that. That generally is in the spring and the fall, when we see a lot of dew on our cars in the morning or on bushes and everything that around us. When we have that kind of an issue, that's generally when you have to be real careful and understand what kind of coatings to use and so forth. And sometimes it's just a simple matter of maybe cutting off a little bit earlier in the day when we know that there's going to be an issue with any kind of, a lot of dew or moisture in the air itself.
Hey, Rudy, I got a question. So Jeff
Sir.
Green wants to know, at what point hours does rain not affect freshly applied paint on masonry surface? Not
Good
rain.
question.
At what point in the day, is that going to affect freshly applied paint on surfaces?
Good question. When you're using latex paint on the outside, you're going to be using, you probably, especially on the walls, you're looking at about an hour to an hour and a half before it rains for it, and without it affecting the coating itself. Oil-based paints, because they take a little bit longer to dry, they're not going to dissolve in water, but it can, the rain falling on there can affect the gloss and the appearance of the coating itself. So and you're going to find that most of the coatings used in South Florida outside, and we'll get a little bit reasons into a little bit later in the presentation, most of the coatings used outside where rain is going to affect it are latex coatings from any manufacturer.
I got some warranty questions. Are you going to be going over warranties, or do you want to handle those now?
We could probably do that. Let's do that a little bit later.
Okay.
I guess we're going to be talking about surface prep and so forth, and we'll go from there. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Not a problem. Okay. Surface preparation. This is, again, this is the key. When you hire contractors, premium contractors like Munyan Painting, this is the most important part of any kind of a paint job, is the preparations that you're going to be doing. Using the correct surface preparation, and also again, using the right coatings to prime with and so forth. I'd rather have a properly prepared job used with a cheaper coating than an improperly prepared job with a premium coating. Preparation is the key. When you're paying a painting contractor, you're paying that painting contractor generally for the preparation and the labor it takes to be able to do it. And that's the biggest part of painting. Paint generally is anywhere from 15 to 25% the cost of any job, and the labor is the biggest piece of it. So surface prep is real key, and that's why I always like to make sure that at this part of the presentation, in this presentation, we talk a lot about that, so you could understand. And again, each surface deals with different type of surface, each type of different preparation. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that, just so you could understand the kind of thing that you're working with here. Painting wood. Again, essentially what you really got to do is just make sure that wood is clean. You'll see on the photograph there, you see he's actually painting some shingle roofs. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of that down here. However, we do, but you'll see what he's pressure cleaning, and a lot of it is the staining, but a lot of the black that we're talking about, and we'll see it later, is mildew. Mildew is I consider it the state flower of Florida. It grows pretty much anywhere. It'll even grow on us if we stand still long enough. So we have to make sure that not only are we removing the mildew by pressure cleaning, that we're sanitizing that surface and cleaning it. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but I really like to emphasize on that because the mildew is such a problem in South Florida that it becomes really kind of important that we do that. The kind of wood, the type of things that, the kind of wood that you're going to paint is also going to affect what paint you're going to use and how you're going to prepare that surface itself. For example, yellow pine, southern yellow pine may have knots that produce sap. So you have to make sure then that sap could actually bleed through the coating. So you got to make sure you're using the right coating to be able to go through that. Sometimes, especially when you're using the cedar shakes that you have on here, The cedar shakes and redwood are using a lot of, they have a lot of tannins. These also will tend to bleed through the coating itself. So you have to kind of balance the kind of paints that you're using with the substrate that you're trying to you're coating, along with the cost and the durability factors of each. So that's why it's really important to use, especially when you're investing money in painting a property outside. Make sure you're talking to qualified personnel that understand coatings, not only from the not only from the painting contractor, but especially the manufacturer. You know, we are the eyes and ears of our companies, and we don't want to have any kind of issues with our coating. So we'd rather spend the time to understand what we're using and understand what you're using, give you the right procedures and the right coatings to use, so you could have the wisest use of your money at that time. Okay, staining wood. Essentially, when you're staining wood itself, again, when you're staining, you get, again, clean. You have to make sure it's clean and dry. Thankfully, in South Florida, we don't have a lot of staining itself. The one thing is when you're painting or staining pressure treated wood, and we have a lot of that down here. If you do that, you've got to not only let the wood dry, you've got to let the chemical that's used in pressure treated lumber. You've got to be able to kind of let that chemical kind of wear out a little bit, because again, pressure treated lumber is made to keep water out of the coating, but it also keeps paint from penetrating into the coating for adhesion. So little quick test you could do on that. If you want to paint pressure treated lumber, take a spray bottle, fill it up with water, spray it on the wood, and if the water beads up, like when you just freshly wax your car and runs off, you're not going to get any paint to adhere to that without having to remove that. So the best thing to do is to wait to give it some time like that. So again, staining, we don't have a lot here, so it's not a reason to spend a lot of time, but removing loose fibers and getting nails below the hole are really kind of the biggest thing. A lot of questions we have when with restaining wood. A lot of woods have a kind of a finish on there, like a varnish, or like in this particular instance, a door or window. If you put stain on top of a coating that's already on there, the stain is made to penetrate into the wood to give it color. If you do not remove the coating system that's on there, or whatever kind of clear coat that's on there, stain is not going to work properly, and you're going to get a very blotchy looking surface. So again, the way to do it is to remove as much of the coating as possible. If you have a lot of discoloration on the wood, you could use a wood bleach system to be able to kind of make the wood all one consistent color. And the one thing about wood, different types of wood will absorb stain differently, and it's going to make it look completely different. So something that you have to keep in mind. Masonry, that's nothing that we see down in South Florida, correct? That's never around down here. The biggest thing when you're painting, again, with masonry, we're talking about everything from precast concrete when you're painting concrete masonry, cinder block. Stucco is the most prevalent thing. Another part that we have to take in consideration is EIFS. That's that kind of a plaster type system that's applied over top of a thin sheet of plaster that's applied over top of styrofoam, and makes it's easy to be able to do a lot of decorations with it. But a lot of we have to kind of take that in consideration. The biggest issue that you're dealing when you're dealing with concrete itself is you have to take in consideration the porosity of the surface that you're painting with, and then the pH levels and of the surface itself. All concrete is contains pH. When you have a curing period, when masonry is applied of 30 days, what you're trying to do is just allow that water to be able to come out of the coating itself, because the alkali or the pH that's inside any concrete type of finish itself, if that particular water and pH comes to the surface, and if you have water inside masonry, water as it dries up, it's going to solubilize whatever pH or alkali that's in the concrete. And if you put paint on top of that particular surface, as that moisture comes through, latex paints are breathable. So latex paints will allow moisture vapor to pass through, but it will not allow the salts that the moisture has solubilized. So that will tend to collect behind the coating itself. So that will cause an adhesion issue with the coatings, with masonry. So you really have to make sure that you're doing it correctly, and you're making sure that pH is not going to be the biggest problem, because that that hot masonry kinds of problem. Also, the most important part, and Carmelo is going to go into this a little bit later on, trying to keep the water out of the concrete or out of masonry. That really is what causes the most amount of damage to the masonry itself, because you can reactivate the alkali within that concrete or masonry, and it can cause the paint to burn off and to lose adhesion. But most importantly, in these building structures, as we're going to get into, as Carmelo will, water getting into there will cause a lot of the rusting and issues that you have with the steel that's all concrete, and that's where you're going to get into a lot of repairs and so forth. So painting in any substrate outside, especially, it's your first line of protection. So that's why it's a good idea to make sure that you're painting on a regular basis. It's a lot cheaper to paint than what Carmelo is going to be going over when he starts talking about concrete restoration. So protect your building. Don't wait too long when you're painting. The warranty periods that we're talking about, we'll talk about a little bit here and further, they're made on purpose. Even if the coating looks good, you want to catch it before that happens, so that you have a good anchor system, so you can keep that water out of your property, out of your building or home, or whatever that we're working with itself. So latex painting metal.
The previous segment, let me interrupt you real quick. There was a question about the wood staining. So should you or could you apply a sealer coat on wood before staining?
No, you don't want to do it. You would want to do that afterwards. You don't want to do it before, because if you seal the wood, stain needs to be able to absorb into the wood, the color of the wood. It doesn't lay on top like paint. It absorbs into it. So you need to be able to you want that wood as porous as possible for the stain to do its job. If you're going to put any sealer, do it after the stain.
Thank you.
All right. Painting metal. Again, the biggest issue in painting metal down here, again, there's too many things that you could look at here, but the biggest issue you have, especially when you're painting new metal, is that there's usually a kind of a shipping oil, a manufacturing oil that's made on it. You got to make sure that metal is clean. Galvanized metals cannot use oil-based paints on top of it, because there will be an issue with what we call saponification that will cause a lack of adhesion. And again, a lot of material to cover. As you can see, there's just so many things that can happen in the surface prep. Talk to your manufacturer's rep, talk to your painting contractor, and get the information on how to prepare surfaces. That is key to any paint job, any good paint job. And especially if you're spending money on doing a big property, it's the inspection to make sure that everybody is actually following what they're doing and doing it properly itself. So let's talk a little bit about why people paint. We all know why people paint. We talk about color. It sets a mood. Again, color also gives the appearance of a building. It will raise the value of your property. The sheen level is important as well, because it's going to give you the performance characteristics of the product itself. But the biggest part for me, especially in the area that we live in, is protection. Even inside surfaces, all building materials are made to have a coating applied to it. So if you don't have a proper coating on there, or an improper coating, or you don't wait too long, you can have some issues with that. So you want to make sure that you're doing it, you're using it correctly itself. Color is the driving factor. And again, I could talk about color all day long. There's a science about color. The color wheel itself here that you're seeing here, it's important to understand color when you're selecting colors. But the color wheel here is, again, Isaac Newton I think was the first guy to come up with what he could see in color. These colors here, if you see light during the day, all these colors together basically make the white light that we're seeing today. If you look at it through a prism, you're seeing all these kind of shades here. How color affects the body and the mind, and understanding color is really critical when you're painting your property. Trust me, and painting, when we're getting involved with color consultation and trying to change the colors of a building, one of the most emotional and hardest issues to be able to deal with is selecting color. I've seen people move out of their units because the building is not done right. I've seen jobs delayed for 3, 4, 5 years because there's no agreement on color. So you really need to understand that. And again, but you have to factor that in with, some colors don't work as well outside as others. Some colors have certain limitations. So you have to kind of look at that itself. Again, designers go to school for this, they get degrees on this. So it's kind of simple when you're picking colors. There's three basic type of schemes that you could go with. If you could go back to, if we go back to the finish, to the color wheel itself, the analogous color schemes is basically picking three colors in a row. Like for instance, if you go back to the wheel here, 3 colors in a row. That's kind of a way to look at a scheme. And when you're looking at a color wheel and the way the designer looks at it, just to get an idea, we're looking at it on a kind of a one-dimensional type of version, what the color is like. But you really have to, when you understand designers, what they're doing is taking this color wheel and essentially turning it on its side and then expanding it to where you're looking at every different shade and hue of that particular, say, yellow and yellow orange, and putting those color combinations together is how they make it work. So you could use the analogous type of color schemes, monochromatic, or using different shades of one color, or equidistant, or the triad, basically using colors across from each other. These are generally more dramatic. They catch a lot of more attention. If you pay attention to the color wheel, you'll find that a lot of our sports teams use triad color schemes on purpose because it attracts a lot of attention. It helps sell the products and make the team a little bit more important. Sheen level, very important to discuss Sheen level itself. Sheen levels will kind of, we have Sheen levels that go from flat all the way to high gloss. Sheen levels have a reason what they're good. They have some attributes to it. And you really have to use this to kind of influence what kind of coating or finish that you're going to use. Generally, glossy coatings will give you more durability and washability, and especially if you need it for aesthetic reasons. However, high gloss coatings will tend to accentuate surface defects, and it's going to show imperfections a little bit more. While flat paint, you won't see that as much, but at the same time, if you need a surface that's scrubbable, you really need to stay away from flat finish because it will show everything. And then that's why you have so many different shade levels in between. Let's talk a little bit, give you a little bit more idea about sheen level itself. Higher sheens tend to accentuate surface defects like we spoke about. Flat surfaces, they look more elegant. They're going to hide surface defects, and it is the most forgiving sheen. Lower sheens soften the appearance, and there's the different levels in between, and makes the wall look a little bit smooth, makes it a little bit more elegant. However, if you're looking for durability, higher sheens are going to be a better product to use because the higher resin content makes it a little bit more durable and washable. Lower sheens, they're going to be not as durable, but they're going to be easily cleaned. So you could use a combination of both of them. And again, glossy finishes, they provide excellent finish for smooth luster, and that's why they're generally used on doors and trim and so forth, because that's what gets the most abuse. So we talk about that. And then protection, again, I've talked a lot about the surface protection itself, and the surface protection is really kind of the key to any kind of coating systems you have on there. But you're not going to protect the concrete or the wood or the metal if that surface is not prepared right. So you have to make sure that the surface is being done right. Commercial protection, again, we talked about the fact that there's 4,000 different SKUs I have in my line alone. And again, a lot of that is just to offer in whatever particular system that you go into. You have to use the right coating for the right surface in the right environment that you're going to be using it in. So you have to make sure that, for instance, if you're going to need any type of chemical resistance or abuse resistance, you have to kind of limit the coatings that you're using on there. And again, it's an important component of facilities maintenance, or even on your properties. You're gonna use different coatings, for instance, in the catwalk area than you would maybe use on the outside of the building itself. So something you have to keep in using. 2-component coatings, you're going to use some of that, but you're not going to usually use that. That's essentially where we put a part A with a part B to help the coating cure and to dry. So that's something we have on there. Specialty protection, again, these type of things, I'm going to speed up a little bit through there because I want to get to some of the other systems itself. But again, there's different reasons, like for instance, spray applications or low VOC and splatter resistance and durability. All these will help us determine what kind of coating to recommend for you. And when, whenever you paint, we go in there and we interview, we want to be able to know what's important to your particular facility or your particular condition to be able to give you the best value for what you're looking at. And again, everything is dictated by cost. So we try to balance everything out to build a system that works for you. And that's what I wanted to kind of end this segment with is, what is a coating system? Essentially, we take all those factors that we talked about before. We'll talk about the fact that what is important for your community, what's important for your facility, what are the conditions of your facility at that time. We also want to know what are going to be when you're going to be painting. For instance, in a building or an HOA, how many people are going to be around. All these kind of things really kind of factor into choosing the right coating, and to build that system is going to be able to do it right. And when you're building a system, one of the things that as manufacturers that we do is that we'll build a system for you along with a kind of a coatings or preparation system. We do specifications, and part of the inspection process that I do will allow especially when you're doing a building outside, is to make sure that the contractor you've chosen is following those specifications, following the coating system, and making sure, and then we can identify the areas before they become an issue. Rudy and I are having right now an issue ourselves on a particular building. He's being painted, and we're trying to give the information to the owner of the building. All we could do is give the information to the owner, and hopefully the owner will be able to understand. But again, that's where, and a lot of this system with the specifications leads to warranty. So Rudy, do you want to ask that question now about the warranty questions that you were having? You're on mute, Rudy. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, so Jeff Green asked a question about the warranty on electrostatic painting. For those that don't know, electrostatic painting is a method that we use for metal. We can also use it for some plastics and some other things, but it's where the item is negatively charged and the paint is positively charged. It's more of an advanced application that we do, but there's no warranty usually when it's in the field with direct-to-metal paint. So you just want to know why there isn't a warranty for electrostatic paint applications.
Okay. The warranty system that any manufacturer is going to give you, if they have an 8 to 10 year warranty system, it's going to be only for the concrete surfaces. And read the details on there. It's in all the warranties. It's in all the specifications. It's usually anywhere from a 10 to 15 page document or more. So there's a lot to read, but generally no one will warranty wood or metal down here. And the reason behind that is that metal is a very, concrete and masonry is more of a stable surface. So you could actually control that a little bit more, especially in South Florida. The expansion and contraction of the surface of a concrete surface is not going to be quite as much as you get with wood or metal, and it's going to kind of be a little bit easier to prepare. Metal moves too much. There's too much the level of preparation in metal is a lot higher than it is going to be on concrete, and the same thing goes for wood. So sometimes you have to kind of balance the cost of the preparation for metal versus maybe even replacement at times, or the cost of the coating. So it's a balance that we all have to do with our budgets. Generally, with metal surfaces itself, metal paint, the paint on metal generally doesn't last as long as it does on walls. A lot of it is because people are touching it a lot more. Balcony railings, for instance, doors, and those are, you don't run into that. The other factor with metal that really kind of affects the warranty is rusting. Most metal is, even galvanized metal, even aluminum. When metal is manufactured, the object of that metal's lifetime is to make sure that that metal wants to return to the original state that it was found in, to iron ore or to aluminum oxide. It wants to go back to that system. The coating systems will prevent it. In South Florida, we have a little thing called water. And water really is kind of the conductor of the electrical process that occurs with rusting. And that's why, metal, with the movement of metal, the coatings will move with it. But the durability factor of those issues just kind of make it doesn't make it fair or to the owner or to the painting contractor, the manufacturer, to be able to actually issue a warranty, because most of the failures that you're going to run into are going to be on metal surfaces. So that's why it's generally not in the industry. It's not a surface that's it's kind of warranted, along with wood, because wood, again, it's a volatile substrate. It always wants to absorb water, and it always wants to go back to its original state. So whenever you cut a tree, you've actually killed the surface, the tree, and it really wants to go back to its original kind of to disappear, to kind of do the natural recycle. So those why those two systems are. But if you look at these systems, and if anybody gives you a warranty for that, look at the warranty, read the details of the warranty, and see what is actually covered. I think most people will be shocked and surprised on how much or how little the warranties actually cover. Good preparation, good manufacturer, and especially a good painting contractor is going to really determine how long that job is going to last for.
Right. So on the painting, on the coating systems, how do adjacent coating systems react to each other? For example, if there's wood trim on top of masonry, how will the coatings react to each other? And also, I think it's important to point out on sometimes you don't know what's on your building. And that's why you want to get somebody like Benjamin Moore and Rudy out there, because you could have some coatings on your roof or on your substrate, and you don't know what's going on top of that. You want to make sure that they're going to be able to bind. So how do those systems react, and how important is that?
Well, that's why you have, again, that's why we have 4,000 SKUs. You have to be able to understand what coating is going to work in a particular circumstance and what coating is not going to work in a particular circumstance. Wood generally takes a little bit. We generally like to use, because of the water resistance, glossier finishes tend to work a little bit better. So we like to use glossier finishes on wood. It gives it a little bit more durability. Metal, the same reason. But then again, there are some coatings. For instance, I was asked to paint a building downtown West Palm Beach. Through research and looking at the coating itself, we found out that the kind of coating that was used on there is a siliconized based elastomeric paint. You wouldn't know that unless you actually looked at the paint, touched the paint, and looked at some of the paint that was used there before. But if you were to put a conventional coating system on top of that particular paint system would have, any particular paint system, conventional paint system we would have recommended on there would have failed. After all the preparation, after all the cleaning, even after putting sealer, would have failed. So, you have to go up there and to kind of just understand what you're running into and looking at. So it is difficult. It's not an easy thing. That's why there's so many different, in 30 years, I've been in the paint business since I was 16. So it's at least 2 or 3 years. Actually, it's about 45 years I've been in the paint business. I still see circumstances that puzzle me. But research and somebody understanding someone's experience and looking at surfaces is really your best bet to figure out what's on there, especially when you're investing the kind of money that it takes. Outside of concrete restoration and roofing, painting is usually going to be the highest cost that you're going to spend on your property. So you want to make sure you're using that money wisely, and use the people around you, the experts that are going to be able to give you with their best reputation, that's going to give you the best results for that.
So elastomeric coatings, there's another question about that.
Yep.
And I've painted a lot of buildings that have an elastomeric coating on it. And once you paint that, like you said, you're pretty much married to that type of product, because nothing's going to kind of stick to that silicone and that elastomeric coating, like you just mentioned. So where is there an elastomeric coating? What is it, under what circumstances do we want to use an elastomeric coating?
Okay. Yeah, one thing, just to clarify, the coating system that we talked about before, the siliconized elastomeric, that's a very unusual coating. That means that particular resin had silicone in it. The idea behind that was the way the manufacturer made it was, of course, to be able to clean for the dirt not to stick so easily to that silicone resin in that elastomeric coating itself. That didn't really work. It's attracting dirt. However, that particular building is now tied into using that siliconized elastomeric from here on out. On a conventional elastomeric coating, the elasticity of that coating will usually disappear, and all latex paints have a little bit of flexibility. So on top of an older elastomeric coating, you can use a conventional acrylic latex finish on top of it without adhesion. just that one building, because it's siliconized elastomeric, it's not a common used item. It does have a problem. It will have a problem with adhesion. The biggest thing that you're going to run into is when you're painting with elastomeric and painting on top of elastomerics. Elastomerics are generally higher build coatings. They're made to be waterproof. They will waterproof both ways, not just one way. So if water gets behind it, you're going to have a little bit. You're going to have the problem with the water coming out or kind of passing through the water vapor passing through the coating. The one thing you got to be worried about when you're painting on top of elastomeric or even additional coatings is that the more paint that you put on a building, the less that coating is going to be able to breathe. We have a real good example nowadays what we run into. When you wear one mask, you're able to breathe fairly easy. Think about when you're putting on 2 or 3 masks, how it would feel to breathe through that. And water has the same problems when you're repainting on top of buildings. The more coats of paint you put on there, the less and less that surface is going to be able to breathe. So you can have some issues with water piling up behind the coating and blowing the coating up or kind of causing bubbles, which could cause failure of the coating. And that goes even sometimes beyond the scope of preparation and so forth. Those are just conditions you don't run into until after you start painting.
So we talked a little bit about electrostatic painting. Powder coating compared to electrostatic painting. One's powder based, usually done in a factory. Electrostatic painting is usually able to be done in a similar process, liquid applied, but in the field. So how do you compare the powder coating?
Generally, what we're talking about is that, again, we're talking about methods of application here. Powder coatings do require to be made in a controlled facility. A lot of times they need heat to be able to allow the coating to dry and to go through the curing process. So that's why it has to be done in a shop or in the field itself. Electrostatic coating, technically electrostatic coating you could use any kind of, you could use a latex or oil base or anything on there. However, generally with electrostatic coatings, because of the properties of that negative and positive charge you're talking about, you have to use a coating like generally like what we call an aliphatic urethane or urethane coating that first of all could hold that charge, because not all coatings can or not all resins can, and then to apply it. The electrostatic coating is generally made to apply a better quality coating like a aliphatic urethane, similar to what car paint is that we put on there. And it gives it a better finish. You have a lot less overspray, gives it a little bit better kind of mill thickness on the coating, which gives you the protection on that metal, and just appears a lot fast. It appears smoother because of the spray application. It kind of tends to wrap around metal railings, and it's just going to be a smoother type of a finish and give that aliphatic urethane. When you're going through that cost, it's better to use a better quality coating than a coating that is going to fail within a year or so.
Don't you have to rough those railings up to do the electrostatic application?
You have to rough those surfaces. You have to rough any kind of metal surfaces up. Anytime that you paint, you have to, especially if you're painting on top of another coat of paint, you have to kind of any kind of gloss that you have on there, you have to sand. And the one thing I like to talk about sanding is sanding this. If you pass a piece of sandpaper over top of an oil-based paint or an aliphatic urethane, you have to make sure you're using the right sandpaper. You got to be able to scratch that surface. I had a building one time earlier in my career, 500 oil-based paint doors were painted and inside this big building down in Fort Lauderdale. The guy put oil base on top of oil base. We're not going to have no problem. We're going to have adhesion on it. One of the curing processes we talked about is that oil bases, they cure by oxidation. They never really stop getting hard. So an oil-based paint that's a year old is not going to be anywhere near as hard or brittle as a coating that's maybe 20 years old. So in that particular instance, the contractors had these lower end guys sand doors, but they used a grit sandpaper that didn't even scratch the finish. So we had 500 doors where the oil-based paint wouldn't adhere to oil-based because the oil-based paint underneath it was so brittle and so hard that even sandpaper couldn't cut it. So, when you're looking at a painting contract, they have to be able not only just to pass the sandpaper, but to make sure that they're doing the job right to get the right adhesion. And that metal surfaces, whether you're using application method like brushing, rolling, or using an airless sprayer or electrostatic sprayer, preparation's all the same. Doesn't change. You have to do the same preparation for each one.
Thank you.
Rudy, let's say there's a building that's had 20 years of paint applied over and over and over, and there's bubbles that are starting to appear. How should that building be prepared before its next painting? Should all those bubbles be completely removed?
Absolutely. Whenever you see bubbles, generally, if you see bubbles on any kind of a substrate, especially in concrete, 80 to 90, usually even higher than that, 90, 95% of the time, the bubble is going to be occurring because there's moisture trying to get out to that coating. We talked about the fact, how it's harder to breathe. It's harder to breathe when you have multiple masks on. Well, if you have a 20-year-old building or older, and a lot of the buildings in our area are a lot of them are getting up into the 40-year range now, they have multiple coatings on there. And if you simply put another coat of paint on top of without trying to remove that bubble, paint is not going to soak through any existing coats of paint. It's going to stick to the first thing it touches. So you want to make sure, and if you have bubbling occurring underneath and you don't fix that problem of why that's occurring there, you're going to have the same problem even with a fresh new coat of paint. So that's why when we go out, we try to identify those areas. We'll tell you what needs to be done. You might not like what we have to say because it requires a little bit extra preparation, but it generally, you have to remove those kind of areas and fix. And the first thing I like to do, even after removing the bubbles, is fix the problem of why moisture is getting into that concrete itself and fix those issues. And Carmelo and is going to discuss that a little bit further. And Rudy, your company's into a lot of restoration, so you know what I'm talking about. Again, moisture is probably the death knell of any kind of any kind of a failure. It's usually the first indicator you're going to have a failure. And moisture in South Florida is usually the reason why coating systems fail is because of the amount of moisture in concrete.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I know I'm kind of short on time, so I'm going to, I've got some issues to talk about problem solving, but again, I'm going to kind of skip through these things because again, I know I'm really short of time. I want to give Carmelo his time, but these are some of the issues these are some of the more common issues that you're going to run into. Blocking is basically when latex paint sticks to each other. There's a solution to that. And you could call me and let me know. I'll tell you. Oil-based paints tend to yellow, especially when you're using whites. No oil-based paints, even if they say they're anti-yellowing, they will yellow with age and time. And so you have to kind of keep that into mind itself. Latex paints generally do not. Lapping, again, is when you start seeing roller marks or brush marks or one area shinier than the other. That could lead from the wrong amount of paint being put onto the surface itself, a porous surface being used, or maybe not even, or maybe something not being used sealed correctly. Hat banding, one of my personal pet peeves. When you see a painting contractor come into an area, they should cut out first and then roll afterwards, or spray afterwards, because the difference, if you roll on top of a brushed or sprayed area, a lot of times, even out of the same bucket, the difference of the thickness of the coating and the application method can make the color appear different, like what you're seeing here. So it's kind of it's a phenomenon, but most good painting contractors understand the difference. Sagging, again, you apply too much paint, or you paint it in times when the surfaces are too hot. Blistering, we talked a little bit about that. You paint on top of a chalky surface with concrete, you'll get a lot of blistering. But again, a lot of times when you get that, you'll see that moisture is generally the culprit of it. Chalking is normal in exterior paint. It's not part of any warranty. That's why I say read the warranty itself. We can explain as we're going through the process of recommending the right coating. We could talk to you differences of why paint's chalk and why a shinier paint tends to chalk less than a flat paint. Generally because the amount of resin's on there. It says to wash the surface with detergent. You really need to not only do that, but just power, on the outside, you want to power wash, and you want to use a sealer to be able to seal whatever whatever chalk residue is left after power washing itself. Mildew, biggest problem we have in South Florida. No one guarantees mildew-proof paint. No one, no manufacturer. Don't let anybody fool you. If you're having mildew on the outside, and again, I've had mildew grow on. I live in a community with a lot of oak trees. If I leave my car parked outside, during the summer, especially even for 2 or 3 days, you get mildew forming on the roof of a car. So it's just mildew grows everywhere, generally grows on dirt, doesn't grow on the coating itself. Sanitize any kind of surface that you're using. The most common method is to use bleach and water solution, and you really have to vary that. The 1 part bleach to 3 parts water sometimes don't work because bleach is to lower cost of bleach. They sometimes dilute the bleach to begin with. So you have to kind of work with it. There are some biodegradable cleaners that are being used nowadays that you could use to do that. Cracking and flaking, again, is usually due to improper preparation or lack of, or then kind of the lack of sanding or preparation on the surface itself. Tannic staining, we talked about when we're talking about wood. Surfactant leaching is, again, surfactants are generally chemicals that are used in latex paints to be able to let everything mix together. If you paint a surface that you paint outside and you get, and it gets a little bit of dew or water on there and it doesn't wash it with the rain, it can bring out those surfactants and it can make it look like it's staining like this. A lot of times you'll see, instead of on a flat paint especially, you'll see a shiny finish, and it could cause that to occur like that. So when I'm looking at a complaint, the questions I ask are what? And again, it's probably like working an investigator, cold case, trying to figure out what it is. Where's the location of the surface? What kind of surface prep was used on there? When what surface was painted? The atmospheric conditions. And nowadays you could Google a particular day in 2018, what was the weather that day? So you could be able to determine that and how the product was applied. So generally, those are the questions that I ask, and you figure out, quite honestly, when you're fixing complaints or when there's an issue, and I'm not saying this because I'm a manufacturer, 90 to 95% of any coating failure happens because of the lack of the preparation method being used or the substrate being used. That's usually caused any kind of issues with paints itself. Paints are generally easy. They're not difficult to make. There's no secret in making paints. So you really have to, make sure that when we have a problem, and if you able to recognize problems before the job starts, you're going to have a much more successful job. So again, that's what painting, that's really the end of my presentation. Thank you for attending. Pardon for going over a little bit. So, but again, if you have any questions, you'd like me to come look at your property or have any questions on there, I'm going to put my information on the chat here afterwards, after we get Carmelo going. And again, Peggy, thank you very much. Rudy, thank you for the questions. Really good.
Question. I got one last one for you. Mason,
okay.
Is it better to roll or spray the paint?
It doesn't make a difference to us. Spraying will give you a little bit better finish. Rolling, a lot of times, especially in the outside with a textured finish on the concrete stucco, we actually ask for both. If you want to spray, go ahead and spray, but do something what we call back rolling. In other words, use a roller to be able to force that coating into these cracks and crevices of a textured surface itself. So you could do anything. The key when you're applying paint by brush, roller, or spray or electrostatic application is to make sure that you're meeting the thickness requirements that the manufacturer wants of that coating on that substrate. Technical data sheets will tell us what those thicknesses are, but paint is like a formula. You put it on at a certain thickness, we know how much is going to be left after the solvent evaporates. So it's really more about the thickness and using the right amount of paint on that substrate. When a paint says to cover 300 square feet per gallon, I could take that same gallon of paint without adding a drop of water or solvent to it and make it cover 1,000. But at the end of the day, I'm not putting enough paint on the surface, so you're going to have a failure. So those are kind of the thickness of the coating is really what you really want to make sure, and you're putting enough paint on that substrate.
Rudy, is your
Very
slide
good.
available in a PDF form for people to reference?
What now?
Is your presentation available in a PDF form?
Yes, I can make it available. Absolutely.
Okay.
I'll send it to you, Peggy, and to Rudy, and then you can make it available. I think this presentation is also going to be on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. So you can take a look at that as well.
Yes, Vinteum is recording this presentation. It will be on their website. We will send that link. Peggy will send a follow-up with the link with the list of all the attendees. Please give us 2 to 3 weeks to go ahead and get the cams and everything uploaded. If we have an issue with your CAM number or your, full legal name, we'll probably reach out to you and ask that. So just bear with us as we try to get kind of all that completed.
Yeah, and if anybody has any questions as well with your CAM credits, again, I'll put my email and phone number. Give me a call. Be more than happy to follow it up for you. All right. Again, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rudy. Great presentation. I wanted to ask Rudy Martin, is there any questions in the chat box for any other sponsors regarding budgets or anything?
Nope, it looks like all the questions have either been answered or dismissed as answered. So we don't have any.
Okay, great. I just want to recognize Jamie Galfan, if you just want to wave from Truist Bank. She was a little bit delayed. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carmelo. And Carmelo, you want to introduce your program on concrete restoration